Well, hello and welcome to another amazing guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and today we're going to go down a road that we don't travel very often here on the podcast. And I'm excited because some of you may know, some of you may not, that I spent 20 years in the IT industry. 10 of those years was working on getting out of the IT industry. So about 10 years into my career, I realized that I didn't want to be known for salvaging somebody's server in the middle of the night and getting it back from the hands of the ransomware thieves that had taken a hold of it. And that's really what I was doing. And although it had, has a purpose and it's important work, it didn't light me up. It wasn't something that I was like, oh, this is going to be my legacy. And when I die and they're eulogizing my life, they're going to talk about how instrumental I was in getting the server up and running. So I really started to think about what was important to me. And that's where I got motivated and inspired by the story of my grandfather leaving Nazi Germany and then coming here and creating wealth that he was then able to share with his children and his grandchildren. And that's inspiring me to do the work that I do today, which is to really help people create generational wealth that can not only change their own lives, but can change the lives of their future generations moving forward by giving them a leg up in their financial footing. And one of the key ways to creating generational wealth is through business ownership and getting your business to throw off loads of cash and using that cash in a smart way to deploy it to grow your assets, build your assets from there. And that's the journey that I'm on right now. But it was about 10 years into my career in IT where I had this revelation that this is the path I wanted to take. And I started to go to school to become an accountant, went through and got my bachelor's, got my master's, took the CPA exams, started my own accounting firm, which then led me to law firm owners because I attracted some law firms as clients. So here we are today, and I work with law firm owners every day to help them make their business a profit-generating, cash-generating machine. And by the way, if you want more information about that, go to profitwithlaw.com/elite, profitwithlaw.com/elite, where you can find out how I work with law firm owners every day and making that happen. But one of the things about creating money is also protecting that money. And we need to look at the risk side of things just as much as we want to look at the reward side of things. And that's where we're going to go in today's conversation. And our guest today has advised me or brought to my attention that although we're going to talk about risk management in a certain area, which is on the technology side, which is why I introduced my background, we're going to actually look at it from the lens of how can a lawyer lean into this protection for their clients and monetize that. So I'm really excited to have this conversation, both from what should I be aware of and what do I need to protect myself? And at the same time, how can I take this and use this knowledge and use this capability to then provide more value to our client base and also to make money from doing it. So this is going to be an interesting and fun conversation. And I wanted to set the stage for you so that you don't turn it off, because sometimes we get a topic and we're like, that doesn't pertain to me. That's only for the big guys, or I'll worry about that when the time is right. And for those who are estate planning attorneys in the room, you know what I'm talking about, because you're trying to get clients who are like, yeah, one day I'll do my estate plan when the time is right, when I'm ready. And the time couldn't be more right than the present. And that's why we're having this conversation today. So my guest today is Kip Boyle. Kip is the Chief Information Security Officer at Cyber Risk Opportunities. Let's see. I'm going to give you the official bio, and then we'll welcome him in to give us the real straightforward version. He helps senior decision makers overcome cybersecurity hurdles and manages unlimited cyber risks through rigorous prioritization. He served as a captain with the F-22 program in the U.S. Air Force. Wow, I didn't realize that, Kip. Thank you for your service. In the private sectors, he was a CISO for an insurance company, credit card processor, bank, credit union, and IT managed service provider. IT managed service providers is where I did all my work in my 20-year career. He has also succeeded in other IT risk management roles in the financial services, technology, telecom, and logistics industries. He lives in Seattle with his wife and 6 kids. Whoa, hold it right there, Kip. That is another place where you and I have something in common. I have 6 children as well. Amazing. Kip, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. I really appreciate that introduction. And my God, when I meet up with you, right, I got to buy you a beer because most people don't tie me for number of children. You did. Congrats.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Although I don't know how you went about doing it. I changed the ingredients midstream, but I've got a big age gap. I've got 3 big girls, 23, 21, and 20 as their ages right now, although we're about to enter birthday season and shift everybody up a year. And then I've got 3 little ones. So they're 7, 5, and 18 months.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I think my kids are just a few years older than yours, but we have the same thing going on. 3 older, 3 younger. And my goodness. Okay, you get 2 beers.
And the other thing is you assume that I like beer, which I do. So we're all good.
Any grown-up beverage of your choice.
All right, Kip. What I like to do is when we jump into a podcast, I gave the official narrative that we were provided, right? But people want to know who you are as a person, and we already got some insight. You've got 6 kids, 3 older, 3 younger. But tell us a little bit more about your background or how you got interested in what you're doing today.
Sure.
Just give us a little bit of your story to get started, and then we'll jump into the topic at hand.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. So I backed into what I do now. This is sort of my B plan. I've been living my B plan for a long time now. I actually went into the U.S. Air Force as a pilot, as an undergraduate pilot student. And, in the United States, that's a year-long basic course that you go to. You learn how to fly airplanes. And I did that for about 5 months of a 12-month program. And after 5 months was all it took. And I went, this is an awful fit for me. I just don't enjoy this work. And, when you did the introduction and you're like, what do I want my legacy to be, right? Do I want people to talk about at my funeral, how many servers I rescued from the hands of the criminals? And you're like, that's not exactly what I want to do. And that was very similar feeling. So I asked Uncle Sam, right, hey, can I do something else? And he's like, oh, you got an IT, undergraduate degree. Great. We need lots of that. So go ahead. And so my first duty assignment after leaving flight school was testing air-to-air weapons. It was a highly classified operation. And so I had to learn how to do data and system protection just to show up and go to work every day. And I was really, it turns out, I really liked it. Everybody else hated it. So they said, great, Lieutenant Boyle, you're going to do all of it. So they just, left it all in my desk. And I was like, okay, this is cool. And I kind of went from there. So, but I really, really love it. It's a very purposeful activity for me. I don't really it doesn't feel like work most days, right? This feels like a very good purpose for me to be working in.
Yeah, that's a perfect place to be. Is what's the old mantra? You want your work to be something where you never work a day in your life.
That's right.
Something like that. So I really, it's not always that somebody finds their passion, their perfect thing for them. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of people who listen to this podcast who are lawyers who are like questioning whether they actually want to be a lawyer. They became a lawyer because their parent told them to be a lawyer because they, and then there's some people they were born to be lawyers and they know that they're in the right place. And we have answers for all of you, right?
Yep.
So,
yep.
As a matter of fact, I don't know when this podcast is airing, but once a year I do an entire promotion leading people to a product that will help them build information products
Mm,
around their knowledge set for, for their practice area. And that's another way to monetize their skill set,
yeah,
and perhaps shine their light in a different way, and maybe find something that they're even more passionate about than the actual practice of law that they're doing. The other thing is really helping elevate people into the space of business owners,
hmm,
and maybe stepping away from practicing law if that's what they choose, because really being successful as a business owner is hiring a bunch of really good attorneys. It's not you being the good attorney. So,
right,
it really opens up the world for what they can do. And then once you have a successful business and you have cash, you can do whatever you want. You can
right,
go buy a franchise, invest in the stock market, go fishing, whatever it is that
whatever it
lights you
is.
up. You can do that too. So I love really being in tune with what excites you. But since we have you here today and you are excited about security, cybersecurity, and keeping safe, and especially keeping the secrets of air-to-air, missile, devices is really important to secure. But what is important to secure day to day? Like why are we paying attention to this? Why is it important? And I know the answer might be obvious, but I think the depth of how much risk is at stake,
Hmm.
people may not realize.
Yeah. Well, okay. So when I first started doing this work, it was all about really ones and zeros, and it was all about protecting highly classified government secrets, right? So there was no profit really involved in it, right? This wasn't about business. Well, since that time, everything's changed, and now you can't you can't do the things you're talking about. Moshe, you talked about, building a business. You talked about intergenerational wealth, right? All these things. You can't do any of that in our day and age without being on the internet somehow. But the problem is that the internet is a digital battlefield. It's also a place, it's a dark alley in the worst part of town as well, because that's where all the pickpockets and the awful people who want to exploit you hang out. And, when we moved into this neighborhood, when the internet first came out, it was a really nice place with lush green lawns, and it was sunny and wonderful, and everybody was just like, oh, this is great. This is the emergence of a new place for us to live as human beings. And this neighborhood's gone downhill. And most people just like don't get that exactly. And so I tell them, like, you haven't done anything wrong, but the world around you has changed. And you need to be paying attention to that because it's going to affect you. Um, and so now cyber is no longer this minor technical annoyance that it once was, right? Oh, somebody, defaced my website. Okay, it's annoying, right? You scrub it and you get it back up and running again. Or, oh, Sally can't use her computer because it's got a virus on it. Sally, go take a break. We'll scrub your computer and then you can come back and finish your work. No big deal. But that's not what it is anymore. It's now a material business risk. And with your accounting background, you know exactly what I mean when I throw those terms around, right? It's like the
Yep.
accounting profession needs to catch up to the fact that this is a huge material business risk. And it's just as serious as risks that you might experience to sales and order fulfillment and accounts receivable, because a failure in any of those areas can kill your business. But cyber is even more lethal because it can take away your ability to do everything and anything all at once, right? That's what a ransomware attack does, is it takes control of your data and your computers out of your hands, and it makes you not be able to serve customers. It destroys your reputation, and you feel silly. I mean, to be exploited like that. This is what I'm trying to help people avoid. And attorneys are in a wonderful position to help their clients avoid this as well. And that's, I think, the opportunity for an attorney.
Yeah, so I want to go down that path eventually, but I want to still build up, like, really understanding the level of risk. And as you gave the example of comparing the internet to a neighborhood,
Uh-huh.
I want to lean into that a little bit more,
Sure.
because you gave an example of ransomware, and but we have a problem now. Like car thieves don't need to know how to like go under a steering wheel and like hotwire a car anymore, right?
Right.
What do? They walk through a neighborhood and they just test the door handle of every car they walk past. And when a car is unlocked, they hop in and they press their foot on the brake and they press the start button, because there are people who leave their keys in their car.
Mm-hmm.
Because especially since now everything is keyless, right?
Right.
So you forget to take your key out of the car. So they just walk through a neighborhood, and when they're done, they can leave with 10 or 20 cars that people just left the car unlocked, left the key in the car, and they just literally drive away.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas somebody can get in the car, it doesn't start, but then there's a button right on your mirror that they press, and that opens your garage door. And now they can go into your house and they can steal your stuff. Or worse, your home, your family's home sleeping, and they can grab some of them and hold them ransom.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Home invasion.
And when we look at the depth of those crimes, like, okay, somebody stole my car. Big deal. I have insurance. I'll get the money back. I'll buy another car. Right. The level of risk is there. It's not so great, but they're coming into my home. They're taking my family hostage. Like, those are some pretty serious and aggressive things that we realize could be just as easy as somebody driving down the street,
right,
with my car. And when we look at our business, if our perimeter is not secure and somebody can get into our network, that's the same thing as leaving the car door open. Now, what can they do with it? Well, they can get in and they can just drive away with our business, right? How do they do that? Well, they can monitor your email.
Yep.
And they can see who the decision makers are. They can see who the clients are. They can see the conversations that are happening. And what's crazy is that some of these thieves will be in your system for a year or 2 years, just waiting for the moment. And there are attorneys who are listening to this who have gone through this, but attorneys are specifically at risk because you have money in trust.
That's right.
And there's somebody on your team that has the authority to move funds around. And all it takes is for somebody to know that you happen to be on a business trip out of town, that you're probably in a conference and unreachable or whatever it is. And you can send, and they can take an email that you had sent previously with instructions to an employee, and they can basically tell them, here, I'm in this conference, and I forgot that I need to take care of sending this payout to this client. Can you please wire X amount of dollars for this client to this bank account? And they're going to do it.
Yep.
And boom, that money's gone. Yeah. And now, they successfully took it. And it could be, depending on your practice area and how much money you have moving through trust, could be hundreds of thousands, could be millions, right?
Absolutely.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg of what's possible. I heard some stories, and this is a couple of years ago, of people who, once their email account was broken into, that now gave the criminals the ability to basically access anything else you had access to, because everything has like, oh, if you want to reset your password, click here. They send you an email. And if they have access to your email, they can reset practically every password
on the internet. Your
own.
Email is your identity.
Yeah. And I've been, it's interesting because I'm sure we're going to talk about like things that you can do to prevent this, but I have been doing, trying to put multi-factor authentication on everything that's really important to me. So I have like the Authenticator app, and it's got so many things on the list where I need to enter digits in, when I'm logging in, and we'll get to that. But I wanted to really highlight in real layman terms, like, what is the level of risk we're facing? And I think that talking about these particular scenarios where people don't even think about, oh, I didn't even realize that can happen, is the starting point, because if we don't recognize the risk, it's very hard to talk about the solution.
Yeah, definitely. I can't tell you how many people don't recognize that they're a target on the internet, either by name or just opportunistically. Everybody's a target. And if you're an attorney, it doesn't matter. You can be in an enormous AmLaw 100 firm. You can be in a white shoe law firm on Wall Street, or you can just be a small shop with 2 or 4 practicing attorneys, and you can be targeted. And I have plenty of real life stories that I can tell about different law firms that were targeted and what happened to them. I think what really helps attorneys to remember is that your law firm is a treasure chest of client secrets and client money. Why wouldn't I, as a cyber criminal, attack you?
Yeah, absolutely. And you have, I mean, you literally have access to a lot of information.
Yep.
Depending on your practice area. I mean, in any practice area, there you have client information that could be used against the client by a criminal.
Absolutely.
And if somebody is able to put things together and use multiple law firms who are serving the same clients, they can really do a lot of damage.
And it's not that far-fetched, because it's easy to get into people's computers and to do it silently. People of a certain age have this idea that viruses have to be noisy, and that I know when I'm infected, but that just isn't the case anymore. Viruses these days, unless it's a ransomware attack or a data destructor, their goal is to be silent and to enable that kind of long-term surveillance, and you don't even know they're there.
Yeah. So, okay, we recognize that there's a problem. What are the solutions to the problem, and where's the opportunity for law firm owners to look at this and say, wait a second, I can be a help to my clients and I can actually provide a solution to them, and here's how.
Right. So first of all, as an attorney, you need to be familiar with your rules of professional conduct. Every state has RPCs that talk about the protection of client data and client money with respect to the use of computers. And so does the American Bar Association. You can get some guidance from there as well. They have some formal opinions that you should be looking at about the use of email and reasonable cybersecurity for your practice of law. Now, nobody expects an attorney to be a technical expert, right? I've read many RPCs and formal opinions of the ABA. Nobody is saying attorneys have to be experts, but what they do say is that you've got to be thoughtful, and you need to partner, if necessary, with somebody who does know how this all works, right? If you're not a nerd, get a nerd, and then sort it out and put the client in the center of what you do. And so, for example, we all know that phishing is a big deal. So you should be doing things to guard against phishing attacks, business email compromises, things like that. Multi-factor authentication, the use of a password manager.
Pause for 1 second. Okay. We're not talking about the phishing you do when you're retired or on vacation. All right. This is phishing with a PH. And when we're talking about phishing, it's when somebody sends you something that you are likely to respond to, and by clicking a link or taking an action, you're opening the gateway for the bad actor to enter. And typically the way that's done is, like right now, there's a huge push of phishing happening with anybody who's running Facebook ads. So they'll try to figure out what is the email account that you're running Facebook ads from. And by the way, we're like, our info business, like our customer support email, that's our forward facing email, is not the email used to log into our Facebook account. So that's how we can see that all these are phishing expeditions coming in, because they're all going to that email address instead of the one that we're using for our Facebook Business Manager. But these emails will come in saying that they're from Meta or they're from Facebook, and they'll say that your ad was rejected or that a post you did violated policy, and you need to click this link and review the post or the terms and conditions or whatever, and take action to rectify it. But when you click the link, it's not taking you to Facebook. It's taking you to a site that looks like Facebook, and it's asking you to input information that Facebook would never ask you to input. And when you look at the email, you can see that it's not coming from facebook.com. It's coming from some other URL. And I've found that a lot of them are coming from Salesforce. So it's somebody who's a client on Salesforce and has a mass email, or they're sending a mass email through Salesforce. So you can't see who it's coming from. but it looks legitimate because it's coming from Salesforce. Oh, maybe Facebook's using Salesforce internally. And, you know, so they're getting smarter and smarter with how they mask it. But you can always tell by looking at the actual link you're clicking on, because often it's just words that have a hyperlink beneath them that you can't see. But if you actually look at what that hyperlink is, you'll see that it's not the URL. Now, they're really smart. So they'll mask it. They'll put facebook.com somewhere in the URL, but it's not the actual domain you're going to. So I know I went down a path here, but people don't understand how phishing happens or what it means. And it's really important because that's one of the easiest ways that they get in is by just sending you something that you're likely to click on based on your situation.
Yeah, that's right. And I really like the way you described it. I think that was a very good way of breaking it down and helping people understand who are not technical experts. But one thing I also tell people is, like, anytime you open up a message, whether it's an email or a text, if you get a sudden rush of emotion, whether it's like, oh my God, something bad's about to happen, or oh, I just won the deal, right? Whatever it is, if you get this huge rush of emotion, stop, because it's a pretty good sign that somebody's trying to con you, because that's what phishing's all about. It's about hijacking our emotional brain, right? Our lizard brain, the amygdala, the ancient part of our brain that, you know, shoots first and asks questions later, right? And so that's a great way. So if you're not technical and you're like, I don't know how to, you know, all that jibber jabber and blah, 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 well, then just pay attention to strong urges of emotion from a message, and that's a pretty good sign that you're someone's trying to fake you out, right? So, yeah. So whether it's phishing or you know, a virus or something, a remote access Trojan is a really awful piece of malicious code that can get on your machine, which will allow somebody to monitor every keystroke that you take, every mouse click that you make, and they can even do screen grabs of whatever it is you're looking on your monitor. So whatever it is, right? Know what your obligations are as an attorney under your rules of professional conduct, but then do some things to sort of clean up your personal act, like the multi-factor authentication, use a password manager, and I've got tons of information that I can share, you know, about that stuff. I don't want to unpack it here because I don't think that's really the point of our conversation, is to, you know, unpack all these little bitty details, but really just to make the point that as an attorney, you do have to protect your client, and you have to protect their data and their money. And at the end of the day, it's your reputation, right? That's all we have is our reputation. And there's been some law firms that have lost control of their clients' data, and they went out of business, mostly because clients lost confidence in them, not because the hackers made off with all their money. So yeah, so I hope that really, you know, puts a bow on, you know, what's at risk here.
Yeah, I love the way that you simplified that ever so succinctly. I'm just going to give a real quick example because I know we don't want to get too lost on this, but here's an email that we're talking about. So the subject line says alert, your page may be restricted. And then it says, hello, Meta wanted to notify you that our team has identified an issue with your page content that may be in violation of our advertising policies or other standards. This could include prohibited content, misleading claims, or other violations. To avoid having your page restricted, we strongly encourage you to review our policies and guidelines carefully and make any necessary changes to your page content as soon as possible. You can find the relevant policies and guidelines by clicking on this link, and it has a link that says www.facebook.com with a digits behind it. Please note that if your page is found to be in violation of our policies, it may be restricted. So you're absolutely right. Like if my business is relying on my Facebook page and I get an email that my page might be restricted, I'm definitely going to be going, oh shit, I need to do something.
Exactly. So if you find yourself saying that or feeling that after you read a message, what I tell people is, I want you to stop what you're doing. I want you to push back away from the keyboard or put your smartphone down. I want you to take a couple of breaths. I want you to look out the window. And then after your amygdala is no longer triggered and no longer in charge of your life, because the amygdala doesn't stay in control for very long. But once you let that surge of emotion run through you, you can go back to that message, and it's not going to read the same the second time. And you're going to be a lot more cautious about what am I going to do with this? And is this real?
Yeah, awesome. Okay, Kip, I want to switch gears. I want to talk about you had mentioned in the green room before we got on that, okay, this is a great topic to talk about to protect our attorneys, but there's an even bigger topic to talk about, which is how can lawyers use cybersecurity as maybe like another practice area or something that can be an additional level of service they can provide to their clients. Let's talk about what that might look like. And is it for everybody? Is it for any type of practice area, or is it for specific practice areas? Why don't you lay the groundwork for this conversation?
Yeah, happy to do it. First of all, to the extent that that you and I both have all the cyber risk of anybody, and we've made the case that all attorneys have all this cyber risk as well. Well, it turns out that all your clients have this risk too. We all have it. If you use the internet, you have this. This is a problem. And I think that lawyers are in an ideal position to help their clients deal with cyber risk without having to think of themselves as technical experts. And if you think about it, every company has legal issues every day, and every attorney every now and then will encounter something they've never seen before, right? And so whether it's an HR problem or whether it's a contract issue or maybe some litigation, whatever it is, lawyers are constantly learning new things. And that's all this is. This is just another area of risk, another area of legal practice that you need to know something about. But when you work on an HR matter, you're not expected to be an HR expert. You partner with an HR expert. Maybe that person works for you at the firm if you're inside counsel, or maybe that person works for your client if you're outside counsel. It doesn't matter. You're going to partner with an expert. Same with a contract. If you're looking at a form of contract you've never seen before, you don't have a contracts background, you're going to partner with somebody. And that's what this is going to, that's what you're going to do here with cyber, is you're going to partner with somebody who's going to be able to help you understand the nuances, the details, but you're still going to remain in charge. I sometimes say that general counsel GC also means general contractor. You're responsible for getting the right experts together and to orchestrate their work so that they can actually serve clients. So, if it's okay, I'd like to give you a couple of examples that have happened to me that I think will help illustrate this. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so here's a simple example. Let's say you work as either outside or inside counsel for a vendor, and let's say it's a fintech, and they're not very old and they're chasing some big business, and let's say they land a huge deal and it's going to make their numbers for the year, and this enormous customer throws down a data security addendum and says, if you don't sign that, we're not doing a deal with you. And you look at this thing and it's like 25 pages and it's just full of words you've never seen before. You don't recognize, and most of this stuff. And you've done a lot of contract work in the past, but you don't know if you should be accepting all these terms and conditions. You don't know what's reasonable. Okay, but you can still advise your client. You got to partner with somebody who knows how to read through these things and pick out the stuff that's reasonable and pick up the stuff that's not, and then you can really do a good job of advising your client what you should be accepting, and then making it happen. And you've just now become a sales enabler. Your entire function has just become about how can we close the deal faster with less risk so we can make our numbers. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You said you had a few examples.
Yeah.
You want to give me another one?
Sure, absolutely. So about 5 years ago, the chief technology officer of a prospective client, who now is a client, it's an NBA sports team, reached out to me and said, hey, we really want to get our arms around this cyber risk stuff. I saw your course on LinkedIn Learning. I really like what you said. Will you come and help us? And I said, sure. And then he said, oh, one thing before we get going, our general counsel said we need to do all this work under attorney-client privilege. And I said, well, why is that? And he said, well, we want to be in control of our cyber risk records. If discovery ever happens, we want to be able to control which records get released and which ones we don't have to show them, because we have infinite cyber risk coming at us and finite resources. So we have to make tough decisions about which risks we're going to manage. And if we don't manage a particular risk because we don't think it's that intense, but that turns out to be the cause of a data breach, we don't want a smoking gun going out the door as part of the e-discovery process. So we want ACP. And I was like, that makes tons of sense. So I partnered up with a lawyer, and everything that I do goes through the attorney, and the stuff that can be covered through attorney-client privilege and work product doctrine gets that protection. And so for over 5 years now, this attorney has been facilitating the the protection of all this cyber risk work that we're doing, and it's a wonderful arrangement, because the attorney is performing a valuable service, as am I, and the client is getting well served. What do you think about that example?
I think that I mean, it blows my mind. I mean, some of the people listening to this are like, "Oh yeah, it makes sense. I would have thought of that on my own." But no, it would never have occurred to me that they had that risk, and that there is this little cute little way to get around it. So that's really cool, actually, that you can just funnel it through an attorney relationship, and now it's protected information.
Yeah, so even if you as the attorney, don't care to be conversant with cyber risk management, you don't need to be, right? But you do need to provide that covering, that records protection function, right, is crucial for clients that understand the value of having their records protected. And certainly a high profile sports team, right, is going to be very conscious of the need to be careful. But that should be true really for anybody, right? Whether you're a manufacturer or you're in the financial industry, it doesn't really matter. Everybody has the same problem: infinite risk, finite resources, tough decisions. You don't want smoking guns in an e-discovery. Whether you're being sued by a customer or a regulator, it doesn't matter. You really need to have that protection. And so we commonly work with attorneys, and my firm and my team, we do this all the time.
Now, the interesting thing is that in your example, the client knew that they needed that protection, and basically got you to set that up for them by creating a solution by partnering with an attorney. But our listeners, their clients might not have counsel on their team. You're it, right? Like they need you to come to them and tell them, hey, look, you have this level of risk that you didn't know about, and you can easily protect against that by dealing with it in this way. In other words, it's not just, oh, you need to get better on your cybersecurity. It's, here's the problem with cybersecurity, and here's why you need to fix it, and here's how to fix it. But there's another problem with protecting who has information about what you did to fix it. And the only way to do that is to work with us to get that resolved.
Right. And I think attorneys should be bringing this subject up with their clients. And whether you're a contracts attorney or, almost any attorney can bring this up. Now, family law, I don't know, maybe not. I don't have an experience working with a family law attorney. But, what if you advise your clients on mergers and acquisitions? Abso-freaking-lutely.
Right.
Because, I tell people, if you're going to buy another company, it's like buying a house. Don't you want to know if the termites are eating the foundation, or, that they're in the frame of the house? You can't see it by just inspecting it. You have to get in there. You have to have an expert check it out, or some awful crack in the foundation, right? Something that's really going to mess up your hypothesis about, why this deal is going to create so much value. And hidden cyber risk is just like termites in your walls and cracks in your foundations. And so that's part of your due diligence now, is checking this company out. You as the attorney, you don't need to do that. but you do need to see that it does get done because you're trying to serve your customer. You're trying to protect value creation, right? And the more an attorney can enable business and enable the creation of value for their clients, the more valuable their services are going to seem, and the more their reputation is going to get enhanced, and the more people are going to come to them and say, I want to work with an attorney who operates like you do, not like the kinds of attorneys that are constantly telling me I can't do this and I can't do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to talk about the practice areas that might be exposed to this just a little bit longer. You're right. Family law, criminal law, probably a stretch. But there's anybody in business law is obvious, mergers, acquisitions, like you said, contracts law, all those things. But there's some places that are not obvious. Estate planning attorneys. So many estate planning attorneys are your clients are business owners. And that's part of the assets that they're protecting, or the future value of that asset that they're protecting. So that's a prime example. Estate planning attorneys would be really good for this. Another practice area where we can find bankruptcy attorneys. I know it's another end of the business, right? But often bankruptcy is it might be a business bankruptcy. So they're trying to salvage and keep the business. So you have exposure to them. And while they are trying to get themselves out from under whatever's going on, creating the bankruptcy, at the same time, they also want to emerge a stronger, healthier business. So that would be a very opportune time to have this conversation with them. And I'm sure if we thought about it, we could probably come up with a few more that would be relevant.
And I think that
areas.
Yeah, and I think the commonality there is think about your clients and think about how many digital assets they have at risk, right? And digital assets these days that's a very broad term, right? Money is a digital asset. Reputation is a digital asset. Intellectual property of all different types and kinds, business plans, financial results, all this stuff is digital because it all lives in computers. And so just ask yourself, how many digital assets do my clients have at risk? Because guess what? They're targeted for exploitation because that's what the cyber criminals want. And in some cases, you've got cyber soldiers, cyber spies who want this information for political purposes, espionage purposes, right? So I would say, that's going to be a really important litmus test for an attorney to find out.
Yeah, I want to explore, what does this look like? So the practice areas we covered, but what does an engagement look like? What client is too big or too small to be looking at this? And are you a solution provider for this? Is that, are we going to you to have the solution for them?
Yeah. Well, so one of the things that's different about cyber risk opportunities and the way we do our business is we see cyber as a material business risk, as I opened up with. A lot of people who are also providing services who seem to be competitors of mine still treat cyber as mostly a technical bugaboo, right? And so when you work with me, I'm going to look at things like, do you have the right language in your employee handbook? Do you have the right language in the contracts that you use with your key vendors? I'm going to look at things like, do you have the right policies in place? I'm going to look at all kinds of things. So I'm not going to just look at the tech. I am going to look at that, but I'm also going to look at how are you training your people? What kind of procedures do you have in place to protect client data, and things like that, right? So I'm going to look at it from a whole picture perspective, and I'm also going to look at it from the top down. If you go to like a technology-centric cybersecurity person, they're going to do more of a bottom-up approach. Now, that's not wrong to do a bottom-up approach, but it's going to take you into different territory, and they're not going to look at some of the other quick wins that I mentioned, right? Like training your folks and that sort of thing, getting the right contract language in the right places. That's some of the most low-hanging fruit for anybody is to get that stuff in place, because most of the data breaches that we read about, the root cause is that an employee made an error or they were manipulated by an outsider. So what a lot of people don't realize is that just by focusing on your people, you're going to dramatically drop the rate of cyber incidents, because they're going to be better and they're not going to just stumble around. And so if you go to somebody who specializes in technology, they're probably not going to talk about that. So that's how we're different. And we work with attorneys all the time. I've served as an expert witness, so I know that perspective. And the co-host of my podcast is a practicing attorney. So I've got years of experience working with attorneys to approach cyber risk management. So that's kind of how we do it. We're not the only ones out there, of course, but I think that's what an attorney needs to look for, is somebody who's going to treat it as a business issue, not just as a technological one.
Yeah, I love this conversation, and unfortunately, we are just about out of time. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to switch gears into our closing, and maybe one day we'll have you back and dive deeper into this again, or into some more of the nuances of how to implement this in a law firm. But if somebody is intrigued, if they're in the right practice area, they have the right clientele in their book of business, then perhaps they can take a next step with you, and you'll share with them how they can do that. What I like to do is I like to highlight our guests. And the way that we do that is when we close is, number one, I ask you to share one last piece of advice that you want to share with our listeners. What would that be if they wanted, one takeaway from the show? And of course, we'll link up your social media accounts and all that stuff in our show notes. Make sure that everybody knows how to get in touch with you. But you shared with me that you want to, first of all, let people know about your podcast. So you're a podcast co-host of the Cyber Risk Management Podcast. And then also you have a new book coming out, or just came out, called Fire Doesn't Innovate. And you have something related to that for our listeners. So I want to give you the opportunity to share information about those things with them as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. So if you want to check out my podcast, my co-host is Jake Bernstein. He's an attorney at K&L Gates, which is a big law firm, and his practice area in the past was intellectual property. He's currently practicing in cybersecurity and cyber risk management. Anyway, he and I talk every 2 weeks about something important that's going on in the world of cyber as a business risk. And we never use unexplained jargon. We're always talking about it in easy to understand language, because our audience is senior decision makers at different firms. And so we've been doing it for 5 years now. And we've got a really great audience. I would invite your listeners to check out our podcast and see if this makes sense for you. And so that's one thing. And you can find our podcast in all the normal places that you would go and look for a podcast. So on our website, we actually have a dedicated page for every episode, as well as a full transcript. So maybe you just want to skim, right, an episode of ours, because lawyers are great at reading, is one thing I've learned about them. And so, if you don't have time to listen to a podcast, definitely skim the transcript. Okay, so the Cyber Risk Management Podcast, and then a copy of my book. My book has, it's about 200 pages. It has a part 1 and a part 2. I would encourage you to read part 1, because I wrote it for you. I wrote it for people who are not tech experts, but who want to get their arms around this problem space. And I've set up a landing page that you can go and get a free PDF copy of my book. And if you want a Kindle version or an Audible version, I can arrange that as well. And so if you just go to cr-map.com/profit with law, so the name of this podcast that you're listening to now, just go there, put your email address in, and we will arrange to provide you with the book for free. And it's a very easy read. You're not going to have any trouble with it. And that should help you get your head into this space. And if you'd like to talk with me about anything in there, or if you just want to skip the book and talk to me, that's good too. I'll talk to anybody. who would like to talk about this.
Awesome. And one parting piece of wisdom or advice for our listeners, Kip.
If you're not using either a password manager or multi-factor authentication yourself, I want you to pick one of them, and I want you to go figure out how to do it, because that is either of those ways, ideally a combination of both, but start with one. But if you want to protect yourself, if you want to become a more difficult target, that's really the bar that I tell people. Is like, don't go for perfect security. Just be a more difficult target, because criminals are lazy and they want easy targets. So either a password manager or multi-factor authentication, it's going to really drive down your cyber risk fast. Go figure out how to use those.
Yeah, I love that, and great advice. And we'll link up in the show notes all of the URLs for what Kip was sharing, his podcast, and also the free book that he's making available, which we really appreciate. Thank you, Kip. That's very kind of you. And the password manager that we use internally is LastPass. So we'll share a URL for that as well. You can check LastPass out. Really convenient. And my wife hates it because she's like, what's the password to our Amazon? And I say, well, you got to go through LastPass because it's randomized, it's 16 characters long, and there's no way you're going to remember it.
Yeah.
And that's really what you want for all of your passwords, is that they are, they're completely unexplainable, which is why you need a password manager. It's going to remember all those things for you.
And can I put a word in for our estate planning attorneys? If your clients aren't using a password manager to pass along digital assets, the access to digital assets to their heirs, you need to get on that. Because think about the case where somebody dies and their heirs cannot access money or other digital assets because they don't have the password. Well, password managers these days, the better ones, have mechanisms for transferring these password databases into the hands of the heirs, but you have to set it up.
Yeah, and it has a length of time. Like if you're unreachable for 24 hours, then they get access. If you're unreachable for a week, they get access and stuff like that.
Yep.
And then you can also just grant somebody the permission to be able to break into your vault, like your spouse. The problem is you need to make sure that your spouse has security that's up to snuff with you. Otherwise, you've just opened a door for somebody to come in and impersonate your spouse.
Yeah. So what I do is I've got an in case of emergency envelope. It's in our firebox. And then I've got a nerd friend that my wife knows and trusts. And I told her, if anything happens to me, I want you to call up Steve. I want him to come over to the house, pop open that envelope, and make Steve, give you access to everything you need access to.
Yeah, I like that. I like that idea a lot. Really good stuff. And I love this conversation, and it really opened my eyes to some new opportunities for our law firm listeners that I didn't realize were there. So, it's when I get an aha on a podcast, it's always a good thing, because then I know that my listeners probably are sitting in the same seat and have received the same message themselves. So, folks, if you are not a subscriber to this podcast, this is the first episode you're listening to, you want more, hit that subscribe button in your podcast player. You get notified every time we release a new episode. We're here at least once a week. And we really appreciate you as a listener. So just come back next Thursday and join us for our next conversation. It's going to be a good one. And you can also go back and binge on 300 plus episodes sitting in your podcast player or on our website at profitwithlaw.com. Until next time, just focus on profitability, including risk management. And we'll see you next time. Take care.